Yo, what's up, everybody? It's David Brodeur, aka Brilly, and today I'm going to show you how we can build scenes all inside of Octane and Cinema 4D using free image-based texture sites online. One of my favorite resources for this is Polyhaven. Go to polyhaven.com. They've got amazing HDRIs, textures, and I haven't started to jump into the models quite yet, so I can't speak on those. But as far as the HDRIs and the textures go, some really great assets with some very high resolutions here. Okay, so let's start off with making a floor. So I'm going to come in here and I'll do like a kind of a wood floor. Maybe this first wood floor that is worn here, something I want that will maybe give me enough like reflections and surface imperfections on that surface rather than something that's really smooth. But again, you can kind of download whatever it is that you want. I think coming in and downloading this wood floor will be great. So in here, it says it's built for Blender. That's the first kind of downloading preference, but you can really use this with any 3D software that you want. And you have control over 1K, 2K, 4K, or 8K. I get asked the question a ton of like, how much image resolution do I actually need for my textures? There's really no specific answer that I can give you. And that's always a bummer when you're working on something in 3D, when someone's like, hey, there is no one answer for this. But that's because it all depends on the proximity of your camera to that surface or that area. And so if you're really not going to get all that close to the surface, well, you can start getting away with lower resolutions. Or if you're not really blowing it up and making a huge image source like your renders, if your render is going to be like 8K, well, you know, that image texture might not hold up at that level, even if it's zoomed further away from camera. So it all really depends on your thought process on the image that you're creating. For today, I think I'll just do a either 2K by 2K or 4K. That's kind of like general rule for me. If I'm not going to be like super up close, it's not the main focal point of this. I think for today, maybe I'll jump to 4K though, because we are going to be getting a little bit closer to the floor and I can hit download. If you only need, you know, a certain image layer in here, maybe you just need the normal map or just the bump map or just the diffuse map, whatever you might need, you can also hit this little bar here on their site and you can download just that one specific map. But I need to have all of them. So I'm just going to click download here. The next thing you'll notice is that if you go into your downloads folder, it's going to have this as a compressed file. So if I hop into my downloads folder in here, you can see here is that wood floor worn. So if I right click this, I can just say extract that all to this location, and then I will have all these usable textures that we just downloaded. So let's jump back inside Cinema 4D. So I have my Octane Live Viewer launched here, ready to go, and let's just make some basic geometry. So I'll come in here and I will add a plane into my scene. The plane is going to be our wood floor that we just downloaded. So I'll make sure I kind of come in here and relabel this. And then we'll start to make a material. So most materials will have some sort of glossiness to it. So I'll go to materials, create, instead of doing a diffuse material, which will have no surface reflection at all, which is not realistic to, you know, real life. You know, this might be great for something stylized or, you know, if you need to make a material that is emissive, but we're going to start with a Octane glossy material. And it's going to be a very, very basic setup here. If I open up this Octane glossy material, we can mostly just work inside the node editor. And so if you haven't built materials like this before from downloading image assets online, where it gives you multiple different texture sources, not just like one texture source that you kind of plug in there, this will kind of come in with multiples. One of the quickest and easiest ways, just by opening up your Finder, your folder window here, and locating your textures, selecting them all, and you can just drag and drop them all into your Octane node editor. The great thing about this is it will automatically create an image texture node for each one of those. So you don't have to do it manually by coming into your node toolbar here and dragging and dropping 4 individual image texture nodes and then linking them up. So the quickest way to figure out, because they're going to be black to start off with, but to figure out, hey, which image texture is this? If you go up into the name here in the file path, you can see here it says rough. So this will be my roughness map. So I can take the output of that node and put it into the input of the roughness of my material. I select this node, you can see, I mean, I can tell just by the image here, but in the naming convention here, you can see it says NOR for normal. So I can plug this into my normal map. So I'll take the output and plug it into the normal. And then I'll do the same thing here. This is my displacement. Now the displacement map will in fact need an additional node, the displacement node. So I'll just move that down here for now. You can get to your nodes here on the right. I know displacement I can get to just by right clicking and hitting displacement, which is quicker for me right now. So I'll connect that image texture to the displacement, then take the output of the displacement and plug it in to the material here as well. Beautiful. We're good. Almost 100% there. And now we'll take, this is our diffuse map, and the diffuse is going to clearly go into the diffuse. There we go. We've just built that image. And now you can see all the image texture images appear in there as well. Now you don't have to keep your nodes organized like this. You can have these moving all around. However, I really like keeping my nodes organized as much as possible and trying to not cross over different connecting tethered lines that connect the individual nodes here. So trying to keep it as clean and organized, it'll really help when you start building more and more complex materials as well. Just so you can basically really easily open up your material and see and access everything all at once. Awesome. So let's just close out of our node material for now. Once again, if you ever have a refresh issue here with that material, if you just open that material editor up and double click on it in here, you'll see it will refresh it in the window here as well. And I can just drag and drop that on the wood floor. Now for the wood floor, I'm going to expand this up a little bit. I'll say 2000 by 2000. We're not really going to need any width or height segments. Once again, in 3D, you want to try to keep your geometry as low as possible. There's no need for me to have any segments in here if I'm just creating a flat wood floor. Now in a scene like this, I really don't have to worry a whole lot about what is in the background. I know I'm just going to kind of focus mostly on the ground here, so I don't really have to build much of that up. However, I am going to put a little sphere in here so I can start to begin to get a sense of scale within my scene, as well as kind of like the position that I maybe am going to want this to be at. I'll kind of just rotate this a little bit on an angle here. Maybe I'll move it up, kind of getting closer to the center. Maybe I'll change the overall scale of my sphere. Maybe I'll drop this down to like 60. I will increase some of the segments to that sphere just so it's nice and smooth. And as far as placement right now, I'm not going to get too particular on that because I am going to be able to see what the displacement is moving on that surface. All right, I will just click render here. Now we don't have any lighting currently set up, but we can go to Polyhaven for that too. Because if you remember, on Polyhaven, we also have access to all the additional HDRIs that are on their site. But before that, maybe I'll just take a look at the material once again that we're building here. If I open this up, go into the node editor here, and in the displacement, we just kept everything here by default. But in the displacement, it's important to change the level of detail. This will give us more detail in where the displacement is, so a more refined version of that. And so sometimes you'll notice if you don't change that level of detail, you'll actually have like a very pixelated displacement map. So I know that I have a 4K display or image texture here, so I could bring that up here. It'll even divide it more than that. I might even be able to get away with less than that. Increasing this will increase your render times as well. And when you increase the height of a displacement, you can see that floor is kind of moving upward in the air, and you can cancel out that whole positional movement of the floor by moving up the mid-level. So I'll maybe move the mid-level to like 0.5. Now you can see that we're starting to get these really nice line cutouts in between the wood slats here and where the nails have been hammered in or screws have been drilled into those wood planks as well. I could increase this to 4K if I need it, of that level of detail, but I don't really know if I need it quite yet. So I'll just go back down to 2K, working a little bit more efficient, right? And if I notice any kind of imperfections in here, artifacting, then I will in fact bring that back up to 4K. So let's just close this out for now, and we'll come back into the material editor and that node editor, and we'll talk a little bit about each channel and what they're in fact doing in here. I'm also going to change my Octane settings. And so in my Octane settings, I'm going to change the kernel to path tracing. Not really making a whole lot of difference right now because we don't have any lighting set up in here. And I'm just going to reduce the overall samples to my scene, and we'll close out of this. Now, it's always important to kind of make sure that you're saving your scene while you're working. So let's go ahead and do that too. All right, now let's go back to Polyhaven and let's start to look through some HDRIs that we could use for our scene. Now, you can choose whatever HDRI you want. I try to come up with something that offers like at least a little bit of contrast. So I'm looking for some nice highlights as well as some nice mixture of shadows in there, maybe a light direction or source. Also, if this is a wood floor inside, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for me to have an outside scene, right? So that's not going to be one that I'm particularly looking for. I also look at something like this and I'm like, well, I already have a very like brown floor in here. Do I want like a brown wood roof as well? That might just be too much warmth and not offer a whole lot more interest. Same with this one, right? Like this room looks cool because the floor is contrasting this warm ceiling that they have. However, my floor is wood and warm as well. So that might not work that great for me too. Um, I look at something like this, though, and I'm like, ooh, this is nice. We've got nice big windows in here offering some nice light and direction. We've got these black kind of beams, nice white environment around it, white walls and stuff like that. I think I'll go for this. So I'll download this Brown Studio. But again, you can choose whatever you want. And you can see that we've got 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16K image resolutions. Now, technically speaking, and the proper usage of HDRIs, they're not meant to be backplates, meaning we're not supposed to really see them in the back of our renders. They're really there just to add reflections, refractions, and lighting our scene. And so typically I don't ever need to go all that high on my HDRI. The only time I do is if you actually really see very clearly the reflection or refraction of that HDRI in a surface, a material, or an object, and it begins to get pixelated because the resolution's too low. And so in that case, yes, you'll have to choose something maybe a bit higher, but typically, a 2K is going to be more than fine for me. So I'm just going to download that as well. So now we've got our HDRI that we can then begin to bring into our scene here. So let's hop back inside of Octane and Cinema 4D. And we'll go to objects and we'll put an HDRI environment in here. So I don't need to add a texture environment because I'm not going to actually be seeing the HDRI, as you can tell by kind of the general idea of how my camera perspective is going to be. So I'll throw an HDRI in here. Everything turns black right now because we've just literally wrapped our scene around with a sphere with no image in there. So it's just black. And so put ourselves in like a completely black room. So I'm going to download and import in that Brown Photo Studio here. And there we go. We've got the beginning of our lighting in this scene. Let's keep pushing here. And so the next thing, I might just add in like a little like wall. I'm just kind of making this up as I go as well. So I'll move a little wall in here, maybe give this a little bit of length so we can kind of move into our scene a little bit more. Maybe I'll turn the height down so I don't have to move the camera around all that much. And I will get this more or less in a general area in our scene. Now, as I'm building, it might seem like I'm kind of arbitrarily building this, but I am making some conscious decisions while I'm doing this. And that's kind of creating some central focus points. If you ever are working inside of cinema and you're having trouble kind of locating where that center of the screen is, let's first make a camera. So I'll go into objects and say Octane camera. Let's view through this camera. So now we know that we're looking through it. I'm actually going to change the focal length of this to maybe something like 55, something kind of closer to like a human eye perspective, maybe something like that. And I will show you now how to kind of better lock up where the center of that frame is. So if we select our camera, not the Octane camera tag here, but the Octane camera, the actual object, in here, you'll see it says composition. If you go here, you can check on grid, and this will all update in our viewport here. So if we check on grid, you'll see now we have a grid here. So it's a little easier. You also have kind of like the Fibonacci sequence, little golden spiral, diagonals, crosshairs, all that kind of fun stuff to better lock up the center. And maybe I'll just change the angle just a little bit in here. I think something like that's pretty good. I'm also going to take this wall and maybe move it back as well. And maybe move it back in the Z space a little bit too. And what I'm kind of looking at here, if you're wondering, hey, why am I moving this and how am I guessing where this is? Well, I'm looking at this kind of strong vertical that's being built here and pointing towards the center. So I'm trying to lead the viewer's eyes once again to this central focus point. Now, I'm not going to focus too much on the wall here. I will add a little bit of a fillet. You never want to have no rounding on a corner. That doesn't mean everything needs to be like very bubbly and soft and rounded, but you don't want that 1 pixel CG edge on anything, whether it's stylized or photorealistic. So I might even change this radius and make it a little bit smaller here to have a little bit sharper of a corner, but having those corners is very, very important to what it is that we're making. And so I might move the Y down just a little bit, see if I can get it so it's kind of touching the floor, but not intersecting. You don't want to intersect geometry. You want to try to avoid intersecting geometry unless you're creating something that's with liquid, and liquid can kind of go through itself. In real world, no geometry, a wall doesn't actually break and penetrate through the floor, right? Objects are cut around each other. And so in 3D, yes, you can push objects through each other, but it's always going to give you a slight weird kind of look because it is going to give you this really odd CG edge to where they both are intersecting. Great. I mean, already I'm starting to be like very happy with where this image is going, and I really haven't done a whole heck of a lot, right? Just downloaded some HDRIs and some basic image textures, and we've begun to build those together here. And so the next thing maybe we'll take a look at is what these image textures, if we take a look at them separately, are actually doing in our scene. So let's check this out. Let's take the diffuse channel out for a second. And this is still not giving us the best overall visual. I'm going to plug an RGB spectrum in and to my diffuse for a moment, and I'm going to turn this black. And now you can kind of see what this texture looks like without the diffuse in there. So we're actually getting a lot of that nice kind of wood grain in there. We're getting grooves from a flat plane here to where the in between the slats of that wood, we're getting indented holes and catching reflections in those different areas where it's raised or lowered in the geometry. But let's start looking at maybe some specific stuff here. And let me remove everything except for the displacement right now and our diffuse, our RGB spectrum and diffuse. So you can see that in the displacement, for the most part, we're talking about the kind of the major kind of geometry pushes, and that's what the displacement map is going to do for us. It's going to get us those nail holes that are in the wood. It's going to get us those big grooves that are in between the slats. It's going to get us big chunks of wood that maybe the grain has really been removed from. But let's remove the displacement, right? Remember, all we are working with here is a flat plane, super glossy flat plane at that. So now let's take our normal map and let's plug just the normal map in here. And you can see the normal map, what it's kind of doing is bringing out that individual wood grain, right? The smaller, subtle, imperfections and organics of that wood surface. Now, it's important to note that a normal map and a bump map, which I'm not using a bump map here, but a normal map and a bump map do not change the silhouette of the object. It's purely, just a visual bump here. So the silhouette of it, the shape won't change. However, in the displacement will actually change the silhouette of that object. It will raise that geometry up. But now you can see what the normal map is actually doing to the material as opposed to just the displacement. And then we've got our roughness, which is going to help break up the super glossy of that material. Now in this one, we're not seeing a whole lot of detail out of it, and it kind of looks overall just kind of smooth look. I bet if we jacked up the contrast to that, we might be able to see a little bit more of that detail, or if we needed to have a closer up camera, we'd be able to see that too. But let's plug these back in now that you can kind of get an idea of how each one of these kind of works together to build up that full material. And we don't need that RGB spectrum anymore. I can just come in here and delete it, or I could have just, left it in there if I wanted to as well. Excellent. Let's close out of this. I'm going to name this too. It's important to kind of name stuff while we're working. So I'll just call this wood floor. And this whole time I've been saving off and on. Very important also to make sure that you remember to keep saving. So let's make a material, and in this material, let's create another glossy material. And I'm just going to give this sphere just some sort of texture in here. So in the diffuse, I'll come in here, maybe make it some sort of nice little like blue material. Very glossy, maybe something that will really pop in my scene here and stand out among amongst the, kind of like that wood. You know, even just like that alone looks kind of nice, just having that within my scene. But I want to show you, you know, what we can do with like mixing and matching different materials, and utilizing stuff free image-based assets again. So let's go into Polyhaven, and let's say for that sphere that I just made, I want to create a mixed material and have it separated. One thing that a lot of artists do is they always try to find like the exact perfect material for what it is that they're looking for. And that might make it so you can never really find the texture that you want. However, what I like to do is I like to find some random stuff and try to see what I can do to kind of mix them together. So if I want like that blue shader that I made on that sphere to be kind of like paint, and maybe I want it to be like felt like it's like scratched a little bit and we can see like metal from underneath of it. You know, artists might be very much looking for that specific scratch material or something like that. But what I do a lot of times is I'll look for other materials that might give me some similar qualities, you know, and so I might come in here and say, you know what, like I want to take a look at brick, or I want to look at plaster and concrete, and maybe there is something within here that I could use, that I could use to help wear one away from another. So here's like one wall brick and plaster that could be kind of interesting. Rough plaster, cracked wall concrete, like all this stuff could be really interesting to be utilized within this rough plaster and brick. I think I might use one of these. Let's use this rough plaster and brick. Now, let's take a look at some of the channels before I make that decision. Basically, I want to just specifically look at, you know, the black and white channels, maybe a bump, a height, or a displacement, maybe even a roughness too. And I'm looking for something that offers me a good amount of contrast, a good amount of visual contrast. So I think this offers me the most contrast, because remember, I'm trying to separate two different materials here in a moment. And this, if you hover over it, it says it's your bump map. So we'll come in here. I don't need to download everything, but I will download the bump map from this material. There we go. We've got our bump map in here now too. And let's pop back over into Cinema 4D and Octane, and let's create another material. And I'm going to create a very basic metal material. And the most basic form of it is just by using a glossy material and turning this index from 1.3 to 1. That's just going to give us this kind of chrome material. I can increase the roughness a little bit just so it's not like super glossy and smooth. Just a little something in there. I might come back in and tweak this, and I'll rename this. I'll say metal, and I'll call this blue paint. Okay. And now we'll come in here, we'll say materials, create, and we'll create a mixed material in here. So Octane mixed material, and let's open this up, and I'll place my blue paint in here and then my metal material in the material 2. Well, right now, by default, it automatically has a float texture, which really is working from 0 to 1. 0 being 100% of the metal material, 1 being 100% of the blue material, and therefore 0.5 would be a 50-50 mix of both of those materials. However, I'm not interested in using the float texture at all, which is why we downloaded that image texture. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to say C4D Octane and add an image texture node in here. Now, I could have gone into the node editor and done that in there as well, but we're going to jump into the node editor right now. So if you jump into the node editor, you'll see that we do have our kind of materials, and they are on top of each other. So I'm just going to kind of expand these out a little bit just to try to clean this up. And our image texture. Now we take that brick plaster texture that we just downloaded, and we'll import this in, and this is what we're going to use to separate those two materials. So let's close out of that. We're going to hop right back into there in a moment, and let's add this instead onto our sphere. If you just drag that material and drop it directly on top of the other material in the object menu, it'll just replace that. And let's just refresh that render here. Cool. So right now, you know, I probably want to invert that material. So let's open the node editor back up. Because right now it's very minimal blue paint and mostly now just kind of that metal, and that's a totally fine look if that's what you're going for. But I could say invert, and now it's more of the blue paint in there. You can come into the image itself and you can mess with the gamma of that overall image, and so you can see the lower in this one that I'm bringing it now that I inverted it. The lower I've brought that gamma, the less of the blue I see, and therefore we'll do the opposite. The higher that I increase that gamma as well. Now, what's really awesome here about working with nodes is that maybe I want this surface to have a little bit of a bump to it as well. Well, what I could do is I could always take this and I could plug this into either my displacement on the mixed material, although I don't think I want that heavy of a displacement for it. I don't want to separate these surfaces that much. It's just paint on metal. So I think if I bring these into the bump map instead, that's going to give me a subtle effect to it. It's a bit extreme right now, and you can always reduce that by reducing the power. However, since I am using this image texture inside of the mixed material, it'll kind of change that too. And maybe I don't want it in the metal. Maybe I just want it in the paint. Let's hop out from our camera view for just a moment here, and let's zoom in on this object so you can kind of begin to see how that blue paint now is raised off the surface. Pretty cool, right? You can see that we're catching little highlights and reflections in between those two surfaces. I love it. Now, there's still more control that we can have over our image texture here, which is that plaster and brick. One, we can control the scale of it. Two, we can throw a color correction node onto it. No, I meant to drag it and drop it directly on that line. Let's see if I can get that right. So if you hover it and you get it over that line and you let go, it'll automatically connect those nodes together. And maybe I want that color correction node to also go to this bump. I want those to match. And so in this color correction node, what we can also do now is we can begin to kind of mess with the overall contrast of that. So maybe if you're trying to get rid of some of these smaller details that are in there, some of the smaller elements, you can begin to increase the contrast of that image texture and reduce some of those. You know, again, you can mess with some of the gamma in here, right? And if you reduce this and make this gamma lower, you're going to get even less area where that metal is appearing. Let's just hop back out to my camera view and see where we're at. So I might want to bring some of that back. So I might increase that gamma a little bit more. I think something like that is looking pretty darn cool though, where we're getting this nice mixture of metal as well as the paint surface. Saturation's not going to do anything. I meant to tweak the gamma a little bit more. Let's just bring the gamma back to a 1 here. I think just whatever was default looked pretty darn good. But you have gain, exposure, all that kind of stuff that you can mess with again to kind of fine tune this. Now, as I mentioned, we can also add a transform node into this. And with the transform node, you can change the overall scale of that texture. You can change its kind of rotation. You know, if you want something that's maybe more angled, you can do that. You can change, like I said, the scale. So if you want kind of like smaller scratches in there, reduce that overall scale of that texture. If you want the larger kind of surface in here, you could do that too. Right. And again, depending on the look that you're going for, if this was the look I was going for, I'd probably go back in and change some of those previous elements that I had already gone back in here and changed. I think having something for me that's a little bit smaller with that smaller scratch detail is kind of nice. I mean, honestly, just like that, we've built this whole thing now with free image-based assets from online, and it's starting to look really good, but it's not quite perfect yet. And that's why never forget the Octane camera itself. So much of your image can be changed just by adjusting the Octane camera. Like this is like all your color correction all in one place. And so if I select that Octane camera, I'll go into the camera imager. Maybe I'll enable that. I'll come down. Maybe this is feeling a little bit dull. I'd love to see what it looks like increasing that exposure a little bit. I think that's a nice overall even amount of lighting. However, we are starting to blow some stuff out here, which this highlight compression just works so well for dialing some of that overexposed elements back. I'm eliminating some of that nice contrast that I had in here when I increase the exposure. So I can always take this gamma back a little bit. I think something like that's pretty nice. And in addition to that, some vignetting, right? To build kind of the central focus in here is interesting. However, you can see I'm kind of like the image overall, although I'm trying to draw focus into this area, it's feeling a little bit muted. And so let's add a light in here. So it's very rare that I just use an HDR to light my scene and nothing else. Okay. So 90% of the time, if I light my scene with an HDR image, I also incorporate other light sources to either, add fill light or add some nice specular somewhere, or a more interesting shadow to my scene. So let's go in here to our Octane live viewer, and we'll do lights, and I'll add an area light. And in this area light, I want to move this one, and I want, again, I'm trying to pull the viewer's focus to the center of this image. And I also want to follow kind of the shadows that have already been created from the HDR that we are using. And it's coming from the side here and casting this nice little shadow to the left side of it. And so with my area light, I'm going to want to do the same thing. So I'm going to kind of rotate this, put a little bit of an angle on it, and I will begin to move it back in my scene. And right now you can see that we've now got our area light kind of illuminating this central area, which looks nice. It's currently just, way overexposed, and it's visible in my scene. So to eliminate the visibility of that through the camera, I can go to visibility, and I can just simply turn camera visibility off. Shadow visibility too, I don't want the shape of that light to be able to cast a shadow from my HDR. And then in light settings, reduce the power a little bit. It's getting a little bit intense here. And also, I really am not interested in seeing that light in the reflection of the sphere. I just was hoping to kind of warm up this central area to help the viewer's eye kind of get drawn into the main focal point that I'm creating here. So I'm actually going to turn off visible and specular. And it's going to remove it from that sheen that was happening on the wood floor as well. But check this out. If I disable it, you can see how dull the scene looks everywhere without that. And then with it, we're really pulling the viewer's eye to this nice warm area here. And again, you can control the overall power to it. Maybe it's like I want a little bit more warmth to it. Maybe I change the temperature to like 5,500 Kelvin. Oh, there we go. And that'll add just, again, a little bit of warmth to it. And once again, like we're doing the majority of this here all through our Octane camera tag. And let's go into post-processing. Let's enable that. Maybe we can slowly increase some overall bloom here and just give it a little bit more light. You'll see here, if I give this bloom, there's a lot of elements in here that are kind of blooming out, which is kind of what this nice cutoff is about. You can kind of eliminate it and focus on just kind of some specific areas. Now, I increase this bloom way more than I'd actually want to. Maybe increase it just a little bit more. Maybe decrease the overall cutoff here, right? Just something subtle in here as well. Maybe add just a little bit of glare to this. And then maybe I'll blur that glare as well. I don't think I need a whole lot else within this frame. I might come in here, I might reduce my overall exposure. Let's try like 1.3. Now that I've boosted it with that post-processing effect of the bloom, added that kind of specific area light in as well. Maybe I'll mess with this highlight compression also. Yeah, I think something in this range is pretty nice too. I'm still getting that nice area and that nice warmth here. Also, I'm not really seeing it in my scene, but just in case, I can come down here and reduce the hot pixels. I'll say like 0.5, something like that, in case I'm getting any hot pixels that are kind of scattered and bouncing around in my scene at all. And depth of field is not necessary on this. I think it might be nice since I'm once again trying to reinforce like the viewer's eye, just focusing mostly in here. So let's come back into my Octane camera. Let's go into the thin lens. Let's toggle down depth of field. I'm going to turn off autofocus, turn on my pick focus, and we'll increase the aperture here. Let's say like, let's go with like 10 for now. And let's just click and select that sphere. And now we've got this nice depth of field that is kind of going off in the distance in our scene here, kind of blurring out the background and a little bit of the foreground. We're not seeing it a ton in the foreground though. And now like the full image is really starting to get and come together. You can push that depth of field more and give yourself even more of a shallow depth of field. I think I like the look around like maybe 8 or something like that. So it's more of a subtle gradation as it goes back. But just like that, we've built this entire image from free image textures online, both lighting it, creating some unique materials, some custom materials, right? This is a plaster and brick texture that is now separating those two. And this here is just a free wood source with multiple maps that we are able to import it. And just like that, full scene complete with a bunch of free assets online. So hope you can build a bunch of stuff as well. I definitely can't wait to see it. Make sure to share it with me.